Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Sorry to get started just a few minutes late. As our two cabinet secretaries up in the front would note, it's very hard to tell the President of the United States that you have another engagement. But I'm really pleased to be here today to talk about something that I'm very excited about. I'm doubly pleased to be in such good company. I want to offer a special welcome to our Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, to our Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, to a great group of panelists who will follow the remarks of the two secretaries, Bonnie Bassler of Princeton University, Joel Cherry of Amherst Technologies, Per Pinstrup Anderson of Cornell University, Reena Singh of the Biotechnology Industry Association, and Keith Yamamoto of the University of California in San Francisco. We are really grateful to the panelists, to the secretaries, and to all of you who have joined us in this spectacular room. For those of you who are history buffs, this room dates back to 1879. The building itself started construction in 1871. This was the most expensive room in the building, although the whole building cost only $15 million at the time. I couldn't do that today. But it's a relevant setting for today's topic because it harks back to a time when this nation was just moving on from a long stretch in which the bioeconomy was practically the only economy. When this room was completed, the United States of America was a 100-year-old, primarily agrarian country. It was, for the first time, really in the process of inventing a second economy for itself, an industrial economy. And increasingly after that, for much of the intervening time, the bioeconomy would have been understood, if the term had been used at all, to consist mainly of farming, ranching, forestry, and fishing, which, while important economically and, of course, essential nutritionally and otherwise, was declining in relative importance compared to other sectors of the economy. And it was not widely recognized as being at the cutting edge of high technology innovation. Of course, people who were paying closer attention knew that, in fact, a lot of innovation and technology were involved in the enormous increases in American agricultural productivity that took place since this building and this room were completed, and particularly in the last half century. And others would want it noted, I'm sure, that the tremendous growth of the pharmaceutical industry, both in economic importance and as a contributor to the health and quality of life of American citizens, was in fact a highly innovative and rapidly expanding segment of the bioeconomy. If that term were understood, as we intend it to be understood today, to mean the whole set of economic activities rooted in living resources, in biological sciences, and biotechnology. The activities that fall under that rubric, which include, in addition to the sectors already mentioned, bioenergy, biomaterials, and more, are already, of course, of very substantial importance to the U.S. economy and our quality of life. That's obvious. But the rapid pace of progress in biological sciences and biotechnology across a wide range of fronts has been opening up in recent years even greater opportunities. Previously unimaginable ready-to-burn liquid fuels directly from CO2 and water, biodegradable plastics made not from oil but from renewable biomass, personalized medical treatments based on a patient's own genetic information, crop varieties more resistant to heat and drought and pests, novel biosensors for real-time monitoring of the environment. All of this is within reach because of advances in biological research. While helping to address major societal challenges in health, energy, food, materials, environment, in addition, the U.S. bioeconomy, the expanding U.S. bioeconomy, is going to mean the creation of new businesses, new markets, and new high-wage jobs in our rural and urban sectors alike. To help ensure that the nation makes the most of this new opportunity, we are today releasing a blueprint, a national bioeconomy blueprint, that can be seen as an amalgamation of America's original bioeconomy and the Industrial Revolution and the scientific revolutions that followed. An economy that applies scientific and technological innovations in a number of domains: chemistry, material science, computational and combinatorial science, to our new and highly evolved understanding of the life sciences, allowing us to harness biology to address national challenges across the spectrum of health, food, energy, materials, manufacturing, the environment. Now, I think everybody in this room knows that it has been a presidential priority from the beginning of this administration to promote innovation and economic growth, to support the creation of new businesses, to clear away the bureaucratic and regulatory underbrush that so often entangles entrepreneurs as they pursue their ideas and try to create new enterprises and generate the jobs of the future. The President talks about this all the time, talked about it in the State of the Union message, and many, many others. And he and those who work for him in this administration have really been working tirelessly to put those words into action through a whole variety of initiatives. Startup America, which is supporting entrepreneurs, the January 18th, 2011 executive order aimed at improving regulatory review processes, our commitment to making permanent the research and experimentation tax credit, and our unprecedented actions making troves of government data available for everyone to use and innovate with through the data.gov initiative. But there's still a lot of old think out there when people talk about innovation in the economy. Many people still think about high-tech innovation and jobs exclusively in terms of information technology, broadband, advanced manufacturing, robotics, superalloys, nanotech, and so on. And of course, all that is crucial. It's important, and we're working to bolster those domains as well. But the President is acutely aware that these kinds of technological advances account for only half of the innovation revolution that's been happening in this country, because life scientists and engineers have also been developing a remarkable set of tools that are allowing us to tap the virtually limitless potential of biological systems. When you think about it, of course, it makes a lot of sense to turn our attention to the living world with just as much gusto as we have to the cold, hard world of computer chips, nanocircuits, and high-performance alloys. Nature, after all, is the ultimate innovator, and nature has been about her work in this domain for billions of years. The natural biological systems that have resulted are amazing in their scope of activity, their capabilities, and their resilience. But today, we're in a position not only of very rapidly expanding our understanding of the details of how these biological systems work at every level, from the biological molecule to the ecosystem, but we're also in the position of being able to make modifications at the genetic level that dramatically expand the possibilities for applying biology to human needs, possibilities for making our lives better and for bolstering our economy. The bioeconomy blueprint that we released today is this administration's roadmap to accomplishing exactly that, building on previous landmark planning and implementation documents that are already helping to put this nation on a path to renewed prosperity, the Strategy for American Innovation, the Blueprint for a Secure Energy Future, and others. This new blueprint will be a guide for departments and agencies to ensure that the investments they make in this sector will be well coordinated and highly likely to generate real economic impact. And it's a commitment from this President and this administration that we intend to retain our strong position as a world leader when it comes to basic discovery and invention, scale up, and commercialization in the bioeconomy domain. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time going through the details. The blueprint is available on our website, ostp.gov, but I do want to note in brief that the blueprint commits this administration to pursuing 5 major objectives. First, we're going to support research and development investments to strengthen the foundation of the U.S. bioeconomy. This means prioritizing multidisciplinary efforts that bridge biological research across physics, chemistry, biology, engineering, computer sciences, and mathematics, and encouraging the use of novel funding mechanisms, including prizes and challenges, to support creative, high-risk, high-reward research. Second, we're going to facilitate the transition of bioinventions from the research laboratory to the marketplace, in part by taking advantage of the purchasing power of the federal government to bolster nascent elements of the bioeconomy. Among other approaches, the federal government will increase its procurement of bio-based products, creating jobs in rural America where many of these products are produced. Third, we're going to develop and reform regulations to reduce barriers and increase the speed, transparency, and predictability of regulatory processes while reducing costs and while protecting human and environmental health. That means accelerating application review times by, for example, running review processes in parallel rather than sequentially. Fourth, we're going to update training programs and align academic institution incentives with student training to meet national workforce needs. This administration has already made significant investments in science, technology, engineering, and math education, STEM education at the K through 12 and undergraduate levels. The blueprint calls upon agencies to take further steps through, for example, support for employer-educator collaborations and updated education programs to ensure that the future bioeconomy has a sustainable and appropriately trained workforce. And finally, fifth, we're going to support increased development of public-private partnerships. President Obama has emphasized that the federal government, universities, and companies must work together to invent, deploy, and scale up the cutting-edge technologies that will create new jobs, spark new breakthroughs, and reinvigorate America's economy today and in the future. The blueprint calls on federal agencies to provide new incentives for these partnerships so we can live up to the President's call for an all-hands-on-deck approach to growing this economy and enhancing employment opportunities all across the country. Now, before I close, I do want to give a quick shout-out to Dr. Mary Maxson, OSTP's Assistant Director for Biological Sciences, who steadfastly midwifed the delivery of this important guiding document. That process brought every relevant agency in the federal government together in the common recognition that biosciences must be incorporated as a crucial part of this nation's overall economic strategy. And as anybody who has worked in government knows, bringing all those kinds of players together is not just herding cats, it's herding tigers. It was done enormously well by Dr. Mary Maxson, and I thank her for her effort. It's going to make a big difference. So without further delay, I now want to introduce and hear from our two specially honored guests, Secretary of Health and Human Services Kathleen Sebelius and Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack, two leaders who have proven to be enormously influential and effective public servants in their respective domains, and who deserve tremendous credit for steering their departments, this nation, and helping the President steer this nation in a direction that every day is improving the lives of Americans everywhere. So let us start, please, with Secretary Sebelius.
Well, I want to start by thanking John Holdren for being not only a great advisor to the President, but a great colleague to all of us in helping to marshal our activities and resources in the science and technology arena. I'm delighted to join good friend and colleague Tom Vilsack in representing two of the cabinet departments who are involved in this new effort, but we're just two among many, and also thank Dr. Maxson for pulling all of this information together and really charting out a blueprint, because I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. I have to tell you, when I started at Health and Human Services, there was a great deal of giddiness both at the Food and Drug Administration and at NIH, and what they said to me is, this President gets it, he gets science, he actually likes science. So we have been enthusiastic about moving forward into some new terrain. Path-breaking biological research and innovation is taking place across the country. We've only just begun to realize its potential. It was 30 years ago that the Food and Drug Administration approved the first ever biologically driven therapy, a type of insulin called Humulin. It was developed and manufactured by American companies, confirming our place as the world's leading innovator in science and medicine. Now, since then, countless other biology-based therapies have come out of American labs, from protein therapies that treat anemia and stroke, to antibody therapies that inhibit the growth of new cancers, to new cell-based vaccines for prostate cancer. At the same time, our growing understanding of human biology has allowed us to move from treating a disease's symptoms to treating its causes. And we've seen a transformation in how we fight cancer, from carpet bombing, brute force treatments that don't distinguish between healthy and cancerous cells, to more targeted therapies. And thanks to efforts like the Cancer Genome Atlas, we can look forward to the day when treatments are actually tailored to the specific DNA changes in each patient's tumor. That progress is due in large part to a significant national investment. The National Institutes of Health invests over $30 billion annually in biomedical research. 80% of that funding is awarded through competitive grants to more than 300,000 researchers at more than 2,000 universities, medical schools, and other research institutions. But we know that federal investment alone is not enough. When the pharmaceutical industry's R&D costs have increased 50-fold over the last 30 years, its output of investigational new drug candidates and new drug application products has remained flat. So if we want to maintain our global leadership, we have to examine every point along the pipeline, from discovery to development to the marketplace, and do everything we can to speed up the next generation of treatments and cures. So over the last 3 years, the Obama administration has undertaken an historic effort to do just that. Many of these efforts are documented in the National Bioeconomy Blueprint, and some have already led to real progress for the American people: better health, longer lives. Today, we're announcing 3 new initiatives that illustrate the kind of progress that we're seeing every day. First, we continue to nurture discoveries in their earliest stages. For example, this week, NIH awarded more than $10 million in grants to develop technologies aimed at identifying the so-called functional elements that play a role in switching genes on and off in different cells. These grants are part of the Encyclopedia of DNA Elements, or ENCODE, which provides the Rosetta Stone we need to understand how the human genome forms the words that tell our bodies how to work. Researchers have recently begun to use this powerful catalog to understand how variations in the DNA sequence might affect our risk for cancer, autoimmune disorders, and other diseases. Now, we also know that when new discoveries are translated into new cures and treatments, they create new jobs and spark growth. But too many reach only the product development stage that some have called the valley of death. That's where developers face countless challenges, from complex business and scientific hurdles to the very high and increased costs of bringing new products to market. So we're working to put together public and private stakeholders to make that journey more efficient, less expensive, and less risky. For example, NIH and Eli Lilly have teamed up to release a comprehensive new playbook next month that will guide researchers step by step through the complex process of turning basic research findings into potential treatments for patients. At the same time, we continue to streamline our own regulatory procedures to make FDA's final approval not just scientifically rigorous, but also more consistent and more predictable. In the past, our nation underinvested in what's called regulatory science, the tools and methods necessary to bring innovative products to market safely and quickly. As a result, we were often testing cutting-edge products using science that was decades old. But again, over the past 3 years, that has begun to change. The FDA has undertaken an ambitious effort to improve and modernize its approval process, using, for example, accelerated approvals and innovative clinical trial designs. Since last October, our agency has already approved 15 innovative drugs and biologics. Nearly 3/4 of them were approved in the U.S. well before our European counterparts. Today, the agency is announcing its latest effort, the Experimental Learning Program, designed to provide its medical device reviewers with real-world knowledge of the latest emerging technologies through visits to academic institutions, device manufacturers, and healthcare facilities. The science driving medical device technology is constantly evolving. If we want to ensure a reliable, timely, and transparent clearance process, government reviewers need ongoing firsthand experience, and this new initiative will make sure they get it. So in closing, these efforts are just a start. Going forward, we want to continue working in partnership with academia and the private sector to harness the potential of our bioeconomy and ensure America can continue to out-innovate the rest of the world. This is a pivotal moment. Our nation has shaped and led so many of the industries that drive today's economy, from the internet to mobile phones. Now we need to make sure we continue to lead in the industries that can make our nation healthier and stronger while driving the future of the economy. Thanks very much.
Secretary Sebelius, thank you very much for sort of laying the groundwork for the importance of this day today. And thank you for the friendship and leadership you've provided to all of us. I can tell you, folks, working with Kathleen and the Cabinet, no one's more committed to making America a healthier place and a better place than that Cabinet Secretary. So, Kathleen, thank you very much. And John, to you and to Dr. Maxson, thank you very much for not only putting this report together, but I think from my perspective, understanding the significance that rural America and agriculture plays in this report. Far too frequently in the past, the role of rural America and agriculture has not been fully appreciated. That's certainly not the case in this report, and I am particularly thankful for your inclusion. You know, this is an extraordinarily important report. And just to give you a sense of how significant this is, Kathleen talked about some of the tremendous advantages we're going to see in medicine. But to put this in the proper context, when you think about the bioeconomy and a bio-based economy, here's what's at stake. The capacity of this country, and frankly of the world, to be able to meet the food needs in the future. We have 7 billion people in the world today. Soon it will be 8 billion. Soon thereafter it will be 9 billion. And that will tax our capacity in this country and across the world to be able to produce enough food to feed that population. The bioeconomy, biotechnology is one strategy, one process that will encourage new developments and new technologies and expanded opportunities and more significant ag productivity in all parts of the world, including the United States. It will allow agriculture to be able to adjust to a climate that constantly changes and is constantly providing fairly extreme weather patterns that will compromise our capacity. It will be able to allow us to produce food today on land that is not capable of producing food. It will allow us to continue to produce food during weather conditions that in the past had prevented or destroyed crops. So in and of itself, this report and the work that it will support is significant in terms of feeding the world. If that weren't enough, this report also talks about the extraordinary opportunity that this country has for greater energy security. Certainly, the bio-based fuels have allowed this country, in addition to our own domestic production, as well as greater efficiencies, to reduce our reliance on foreign oil. When the President took office, we were basically importing about 62% of the oil that we use. Today, it's 45%, and one reason is because we continue to find new and creative and more efficient ways to produce bio-based fuels. So energy security is at stake in terms of this report. This bio-based economy is also going to play an extraordinary role in diversifying the agricultural economy, which will give farmers, ranchers, and producers a diversified way of producing income, being able to use waste product to produce a wide array of materials used in the economy. John mentioned a few of them, but I have seen, and I'm sure he has as well, a number of new businesses that have developed, in addition to fuel, that are now taking waste product and turning it into chemicals, turning it into polymers, turning it into fabrics and fibers. Today, there are 3,100 companies in America that employ 100,000 people producing 20,000 products that are plant, crop, or livestock waste-based. And that is just the beginning of a new economy. The President often talks about an America that's built to last with an economy that's built to last, and they're very simple components, which are summarized in this report. We will be a government, no doubt, that will spend less money, but we're going to continue to invest in research, and this report reflects on the importance of research. When you invest in research, you then become a nation and an economy that once again innovates, creates, and makes, which in turn allows us to not only meet our own needs here at home, but also to export and creating wealth here in the United States. The bio-based economy has extraordinary potential for changing the entire economy of this country. Make no mistake about it, this report is a game changer for us. And at USDA, we recognize that we have a responsibility. Dr. Witecki is here today from our research and education component of our mission area, and they've issued a report today that outlines where USDA intersects with this whole notion of biotechnology and a bio-based economy. We are certainly committed to the research component, although, Kathleen, I will say, we're not as generously funded as you are. We'd like to be, but we are learning. Yeah. I know, we're learning. We're learning how to leverage, and we're learning to find creative ways to stretch resources. But we also recognize the important role, and we've developed partnerships with the private sector, just not simply to create new ideas, but to create new products from those new ideas. And the technology transfer is an important component of what we're doing at USDA. And it's referred to in Kathy's report as well as this report. We, too, have also looked at our regulatory process, and we recognized that it took far too long for us to get new innovations into the marketplace. It used to take roughly 900 days for a biotechnology crop to go through our regulatory process. We now are working on a process that will reduce that to less than a year. And we will continue to look for ways to make greater efficiencies in the regulatory process. We are clearly engaged and involved in supporting business development and market development. And as part of that, the President has instructed the USDA to be the lead agency in the Bio-Preferred program, which John mentioned earlier. This is a program that basically says to the federal government, in terms of its purchasing decisions, you have an obligation, you have an opportunity to make this bio-based economy real by using your purchasing power. We at USDA spend roughly $25 million a year on bio-based products. The President has instructed us to double the number of products available for agencies like the Health and Human Service Agency and other agencies of government to be able to purchase. When you think about it, we purchase a lot of solvents and lubricants and grease and oils and personal care items. Many of them have bio-based opportunities, and we can create new markets and new opportunities, which we intend to do. So today, we're launching an additional expansion to allow the number of products available for this Bio-Preferred program to be enlarged significantly. We're announcing a proposed new rule. We're putting it out for a 60-day comment period today, which will essentially designate intermediate materials, feedstocks that will qualify in and of themselves as products for the Bio-Preferred program. Fibers, resins, chemicals, et cetera, that will allow us to expand significantly the number of products that will be allowed under this program. And we're going to streamline the process for designation of a bio-based product, both in terms of the ability of the federal government to purchase it, as well as labeling so that consumers across America have an opportunity to support a domestically produced and a bio-based produced product. We're going to continue to work with the private sector to get these products to market more quickly. So I'm extraordinarily excited about this, and I will tell you that, and I will conclude with this. I speak to a lot of young people, and particularly young people who live with their families in rural America. They've been waiting for a long time for this country to create the kind of opportunity that will allow them to sit around a coffee table in their parents' home and be able to discuss the possibility of creating a business or having a meaningful job or opportunity in the small town they came from or in a similarly situated small town. For far too long, we've been sending a message to our young people that the only opportunities are in large metropolitan areas. This bio-based economy creates the opportunity for us to really revitalize the rural economy, something that's extraordinarily important to the President and certainly extraordinarily important to us at USDA. And it gives us an opportunity to recognize the important contribution that rural America makes to the country. I leave you with this. If you don't think this is important for all the reasons I talked about, just understand that rural America is a special place. It represents 16% of America's population, but nearly 40% of the military comes from rural America. And the reason it does is because they grow up with a value system that's very, very important to this country. a value system that it comes from agriculture, comes from being surrounded by agriculture. Every farmer knows that you can't keep taking from the land. You have to replenish it. You have to give something back to it for it to continue to produce. These young people grow up in that situation in a community that supports that value system, and they understand the country is no different. Giving them an economic opportunity to work and live and raise their families by virtue of this bio-based economy is extraordinarily important to that special value that's alive and well in rural America. So, John, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to focus.
Well, this brings us to the close of part one of our program, as Secretary Sebelius, Secretary Vilsack, and I all have to head off to our next engagements. But I do want to thank both of the secretaries for their very thoughtful comments and for the commitments that they've announced here today, as well as for their many other contributions to helping fulfill President Obama's priority of applying science and technology to the task of building a 21st century bioeconomy. But while we need to leave, please don't you leave, because we have what I know is going to be a fascinating and energetic discussion ahead, to be led by one of my favorite, and I have to say most entertaining microbiologists, Professor Bonnie Bassler of Princeton University. Bonnie is one who spends her days coddling bacteria and eavesdropping on the biochemical conversations that it turns out these single-celled organisms have, conversations that she is now justly famed for having discovered and learned how to interpret, and as a result of which, we are in a much better position to take advantage of these microbes for a wide range of human purposes. Bonnie has been an advocate for the bioeconomy since long before this blueprint was crafted. And if she doesn't have you all convinced by the end of this panel that microbiology is the key to macroeconomy, then nobody can do that job. So Bonnie, as our moderator, I will let you introduce our other distinguished panelists. And again, thank you so much, all of our panelists, for being here. And thanks for the audience, to the audience for being here and for sticking with us, even as the secretaries and I leave out the back.